guess whose show ended badly again? So you may have heard that Supernatural ended, and it ended badly, because of course it did. Because I'm cursed. Evidently, clearly. It hurts at this point and it's just embarrassing. But anyway, I can't let things go. So here is my How Supernatural Should Have Ended video. And with this one, I'm gonna do something a little bit different because I don't want to make another season of Supernatural because the world has moved past the need for more Supernatural. Is what it said in my script, which I wrote 3 days ago, and now I've found out that Jensen Ackles is now going to be producing a Supernatural prequel show. So I guess we haven't moved past the need for more Supernatural, guys. It's time for more Supernatural. But regardless, I still believe that I do not want another season. Look, listen, enough has happened to these characters. Let them rest. And so, this isn't as much a season change, or I'm necessarily making a whole other plotline of the show. This is more like an epilogue, something that I wanted to happen so that the characters had time to just kind of relax, live normal lives, deal with all the crises they've been putting off for the past 20 years because they're constantly trying to save everyone from the apocalypse. Is it super heavy on the plot? No. Does it do justice to all the characters that I wish I could do? No. Because in order to have to do that, I'd have to actually watch the last few seasons of Supernatural. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I have not. I'm basically writing this so Dean and Cass can have the ending they deserve. So if you don't watch the show for Dean and Cass and you watch it for the plot, if any of those people exist, then you might not get as much enjoyment out of this. But if you do want Dean and Cass to be happy and talk through some of their feelings, then you will enjoy this. Okay, so before we get started, let me give all the people who, like me, have not watched Supernatural since the heyday. Let me just give you a quick recap so you understand what's going on in Supernatural. Always a very easy thing to explain. Okay, so the things that you need to know before going into this. Okay, so Chuck, the guy who wrote all the Supernatural books in the show, he's God and he's evil. Cass has a kid called Jack who is not his kid biologically because he's also technically the Antichrist, but he isn't evil because he's actually like a 4-year-old who's very sweet, wrapped up in the body of like a 22-year-old man. Again, just roll with it. Claire is Cass's other kid, Claire being the real daughter of Jimmy Novak, the guy that Cass is currently wearing the body of. So even though Cass technically killed her dad and then wears his body like a meat suit, they have a pretty good relationship, all things considered. She's a really cool character. She's a lesbian. She's got a girlfriend. She's brilliant. And Sam has a girlfriend called Eileen. She's really awesome. She's deaf. Her actress is actually deaf. She's a hunter and she's a badass and we love her. So that's what you missed on Supernatural. Everyone is functioning essentially but Dean and Cass. Yeah, there we go, as per. So at the very ending of the show, as you may already know, Cass tells Dean that he's in love with him, and that basically sets off a deal/curse with the Empty, who's this cosmic being thing. Again, supernatural, meaning that he could save the day, but in exchange he had to tell Dean how he felt. And then as soon as he did such a thing, the Empty took him and sent him straight to super hell. Anyway, at this point in the show, all the other characters decide that the guy, Cass, the person that they've been hanging out with, sort of in love with for like the past, was it 12 years? 12 years. Just doesn't really matter anymore. So they just move on with the plot and they just don't really mention Cass again. They go off and they try and kill God, as you do in Supernatural. In my version of this, unfortunately, they still have to kill God. So we are unfortunately going to have plot happen in between Cass dying and all the emotional fallout of Cass dying. Dean, in the show, tells Sam and Jack that Cass is dead. In my version, the first thing going to change is that they're not going to stand a 2-meter COVID-safe distance away from each other in a parking lot. They're actually going to speak about this. Dean is going to tell them that Cass is gone, and they're gonna be upset about it because they're human beings. I figured that Jack is probably gonna get really upset because he's a kid and Cass is his dad. Sam would probably start to like hug him because Sam is the functioning one, and Dean's probably gonna get emotional as well, or kind of share this moment of like, right, well, we've got to do stuff, but let's just take this one moment to actually acknowledge what's happened before plot has to happen and before we deal with this later. So then they kill God. So once they've killed God, Jack gets new God powers. He becomes God now. They went into an apocalypse at some point. I tried to read the plot, guys. And in the TV show, Jack brings back loads of people who have died. And Dean's gonna speak to Jack and be like, you know, like, what about Cass? And Jack is gonna say to Dean, like, I'm sorry, like, I can't bring him back. He's in the empty. He's not in this world. He's not in any sort of realm that I have control over. And Dean is obviously going to be angry at this, like, you brought everyone else back, but you can't bring him. And he has this shouting match with Jack about it, and Jack is upset and disappears. And Dean instantly knows that he's done something wrong, but Jack just won't come back. And that is kind of where the series ends, in this like happy moment where loads of people have come back. Eileen's back, and Dean is happy, but he's obviously still having to now deal with Cass being dead and not being able to get him back. And this is where my show starts. Okay, so they've killed the big bad. There's nothing else for them to fight. Now they have to deal with living. Sam is happy about this. You know, he's got Eileen back. There's no showrunners anymore, both in the show and out of the show, to control him. And so he's having a great time. You know, he's trying new things out for the first time in his life that he hasn't really had the chance to do before. He's going on runs, he's eating healthy, he's spending time with Eileen. Dean, however, is not so happy. He's having a midlife crisis. He's having a kid parenting crisis because he keeps trying to text God back to tell him that he's sorry for shouting, and Jack isn't texting back, and it's a very confusing situation to be in emotionally. And he's also having a sexuality crisis. And as normal, the way that Dean processes this sadness and this grief and this heartbreak is to drink and basically go off the rails. You see this montage almost of the same routine of him just going about his day-to-day life and drinking himself to bed at night, waking up in the morning. You know, Sam and Eileen are trying to help him, but they just can't really get through to him. And the way that I'm kind of seeing or picturing Dean's mental health or mental state at this point is that he's obviously dealing with the grief of his friend dying, but he's also dealing with his own emotional fallout of, okay, well, Cass is dead. I can't speak to him anymore. The last thing he said to me was that he loved me. And maybe this is me projecting onto Dean Winchester. Me project onto Dean Winchester? I would never do such a thing. But the way I kind of think about how Dean feels at this point is that I think there's a huge difference between knowing something subconsciously and saying those thoughts aloud to yourself or in your own head. And I think before this point, the way that I've always interpreted like the absolute canon of Supernatural is that Cass clearly loves Dean. Like, we literally canonically clearly loves Dean and does love Dean. And I think that's very easy to pick up on as a person watching the show, and I think would have been probably very easy for Dean to pick up on. And I think there is a part of Dean that does definitely like Cass back, but is also, because he's Dean Winchester, really bad at being vulnerable. So I think he knew that Cass liked him. He kind of knew that he liked him back, but never really acknowledged it in his own head. Probably made peace with the fact that it was never going to be a thing. It's just too late now. But now it literally is too late, because Cass has finally said something to him, and Dean now realises that he spent 12 years wasting time, and he's just completely fucked himself. He has been his own downfall at this chance of happiness, which he now knows he could have had with Cass. And I think it's eating him up on the inside. In between these montages and scenes with like Sam and Eileen being happy and Dean trying to like function as a normal human being. And maybe if this really was a season, there would be a few episodes, you know, where it's your typical kind of monster of the week whilst also dealing with the fallout of this. I think that there would be some scenes where Dean would be walking around the bunker. There would be like a quiet moment. Maybe Dean could walk into the cinema room and it would cut to a scene that we haven't seen before of Dean and Cass in there watching a film on one of their movie nights, which we know canonically happened. And we see some of their conversation, we see the way that they speak with each other. We see Dean and Cass hanging out, being Dean and Cass, two people who clearly get on well no matter how you interpret it, or no matter how they interpreted it. And then we cut back to Dean, and Dean dealing with this now in the new light that he has, that Cass did like him back. Oh god, and then Dean just goes on a spiral, and so do I. These flashbacks in the show start as like very quick glimpses. Dean is doing something, maybe cooking something, and it cuts to like a 5-second clip of Cass like 6 months earlier with him doing that, and it cuts back to present day Dean, and he kind of shakes himself off. And gradually these flashbacks become more often in the show, more frequent, and they get longer and longer, and they reveal a little bit more about how Dean is really feeling. He's obviously reflecting back on their relationship, and maybe one night he's drinking to himself, he's incredibly drunk, he runs out of alcohol, so he gets out of his room, pushing empty bottles away. He staggers down the corridor in the bunker, pushes open the door into the garage. There's the Impala out there in front of him. Drunk, he opens the door, gets into the car, turns on the engine, drives out. He's not drunk enough that he is in immediate danger, but it's definitely not a good idea. He's sitting there in the front of the car, it's nighttime. The radio is on low in the background, and he's staring out the front mirror. He's thinking about things again, and we see it again cut back to a scene with Dean and Cass in the car. They're sitting there waiting in the quiet. Sam's not there, maybe he's somewhere else and they're waiting for him. The two of them sat together. Clearly they've been there for a long time. Maybe they have food in front of them. It's night, and it's like this quiet, like sheltered moment almost. And they're just chatting, and we kind of cut into halfway through their conversation, and it's Cass asking Dean, "How do you know when you're happy?" And Dean's like, "I don't know, man. I don't know how to gauge how I'm happy or not anymore. Maybe I like hanging out with you. I like hanging out with Sam. I like cooking, music, driving around, and baby." He's a simple man of simple pleasures, clearly. And he's like, "What about you?" And Cass is like, "Probably the same." But there's obviously something else going on, and he's thinking about it in the background, and Dean's kind of picks up on this and goes, "Oh, you know you'd tell me if you were unhappy, right?" And Cass is like, "Of course, Dean. Of course I would. I'm not unhappy." These sounds of present day Dean start to be heard. You can hear the sound of the engine going faster and faster. You hear the sound of a beep, and suddenly we're back with Dean in present day as he has just come himself out of this flashback, and he sees a car coming at him from the other side of the road. He swerves, realising that he hasn't been concentrating on driving, because he never fucking does in this show. And as he swerves, the Impala goes off the road. The car stumbles and pushes past some branches, something hits the windscreen, cracks the mirror, and eventually comes at a stop next to the road, the engine steaming. Dean shakes his head and gets out of the car, kind of checks over baby, and the car's fine, he can move it. He just kind of stays there for a moment, like, fuck. He gets back into the car and, aching, puts it in gear, reverses it back onto the road and drives home. It's now the next morning. We see Dean blearily open his eyes as Eileen looks down at him from above. He is somehow managed to get back to his bed from last night. Eileen looks down at him and goes, "You're gonna want these." Gives him some painkillers and like a cup of coffee. Dean, who's like, drunk, still a little bit drunk and hungover, and also crashed his car. He's like, does Sam know? She's like, "You saw the car this morning when he went out?" Dean's like, "Great, okay. Just let me, okay, alright." He gets himself ready. He goes into the kitchen of the bunker kind of sheepishly. Sam is already in there. He looks pissed off and worried. And Dean's like, "Sam, before you start..." And Sam's like, "No, Dean, No. And he's just gonna be like, Dean, I'm not gonna wait around and just watch you whilst you kill yourself. And Dean's like, I'm not gonna kill myself. You crashed the Impala, Dean. He's like, there was this car coming at me and he was going way too fast. Sam is just not having it. He comes over to Dean, tries to put his hand on his shoulder. Dean kind of shrugs him off. He's still like blearily hungover and also upset still. And Sam holds him in place and says, Dean, I don't want to watch you do this anymore. You can't do this anymore. We don't have fate's protection. We could die from something stupid like you crashing your car or being hit by a metal rod or something stupid like that. Sam takes a beat, judges whether he should say this or not, goes, Cass wouldn't have wanted this. Dean stares back at Sam and goes, who the fuck knew what Cass wanted, man? I didn't. He pushes Sam's hands away and goes off to make some food. He sounds angry. And to be honest, it's understandable that after everything he is, Cass told him this and just kind of left. Sam's gonna be like, fuck this, we're gonna do something about this. This is the next few episodes, and I think the vague plot that we're gonna go with is that they're gonna try and figure out a way of getting Cass back from the empty, because I'm not just going to do what some other writers do and just blindly accept that there is, you're telling me there's literally in the supernatural universe, there is just no way to get Cass back from the empty. Is that what you're saying? There's no way. I'm not saying that it's easy, and I'm saying that it's going to lead to a lot of episodes where they try and find different things. Maybe they go to like a witch's den, maybe they try and steal something or like speak to someone who knows something. They finally start kicking their asses in gear and start to figure out a way of getting Cass back. And Dean at this point doesn't necessarily get better, but you can see that his kind of determination is kind of there. He's kind of just ready to just do whatever he can more than anything else. And eventually, maybe like the halfway season mark, when all this other stuff has happened and they've gone on this epic quest, they finally figure out a way of getting to the empty. Now, my version of how they do this is the idea that in the show previously, they've managed to get to the empty because they've either used Jack to kind of put their souls in there, but they can't just do that. They need to physically go to the empty to get Cass back. And I like the idea that on Earth there is like these cracks, almost like these dark places, which are why some places feel like haunted. That the like line between our world and the empty is like really thin. And so they find out about these places, find out where one is, and I want to give Sam some plot. So I'm gonna have Sam start to learn all his witchy powers again, because they were really cool in the earlier seasons, and I like the idea that Sam, being so smart and so like good at researching law and of like learning things, he went to Stanford. He's the perfect person to start learning super complicated magical rituals and stuff. So he starts learning all these rituals and things by a bunch of witches or whatever who are really cool, and let's just get more female character please. But he starts to learn all of this stuff from these witches. So they go to one of these places where the veil between the two worlds is at its thinnest. Sam learns a ritual for how to open up this doorway. The other problem that they have is that Dean can go through this doorway because the empty only takes the souls of angels and demons. And Dean can go through because he's a human. But Cass, if Dean goes through, can't get back through with him because Cass is an angel. And they figure this out and they're talking about it, and they eventually realise that the only way they're going to be able to get Cass back is to try and use the same, or figure out a way of utilising the same grace removal spell that they've used in the show before. Maybe imbue it into an item or something that they can then use to go into the empty, find Cass, remove his grace, and as a human, Cass can walk back through the door with Dean. They've done all this bit of plot in the show, they figured out what they're gonna do, they found like a ritual to open the door, and they figured out a way of getting Cass back, and figured out something that can remove his grace. Even though it is dangerous, this is their only chance. So they are there, waiting, ready at the door. I'm picturing maybe it's in like this cave or something, and there's a bunch of candles lit and it's like really kind of spooky and atmospheric, and Eileen and Sam are there and they're setting everything up, and Sam is speaking to Dean and he's like, you know, are you sure about this? Dean's like, it's the one chance I have to get him back. Of course I'm sure. And Sam's like, okay. Dean's like, are you just gonna accept that? I know it's dangerous. And Sam's like, well, I know what it's like having lost Eileen twice, and I would do anything to get her back. And I have done anything to get her back. And you have to do anything to get Cass back. I get that now. Sam still doesn't know anything, by the way. Well, he does, because he's Sam, and he knows his brother, and he's pretty much figured out enough. But he still doesn't know what happened in the room. Dean has not told him any of this stuff. He hasn't told anyone. He's just kept it a secret. Sam is like, are you ready? Dean's like, as I'll ever be. Sam starts the incantation, and in front of them, in like a fissure between two rocks, a crack starts to form and grow, and it gets bigger and bigger, and it has like this weird glowing light around it, like reality is like literally splitting apart. What they can see in this crack is just emptiness. It's just darkness. Dean and Sam and Eileen kind of stare at each other like, okay. Dean doesn't say anything. He just kind of shakes himself up, readies himself, walks into it, no hesitation. My boy. Dean steps through the crack, and he kind of steps into this other world, this inky blackness like we've seen in the show before. He turns around to look, and he sees that the entrance that he's come through kind of resembles the real world too. It looks like the inversion, like there is a crack, and around the crack there is this stone mountain or wall, as if the joining between these two worlds kind of reflect each other. It sounds almost echoey in here. And Dean takes a few steps forward, not really knowing what he's going to do, realising that, as per Winchester style, they have a plan, but they haven't really thought about their plan. And he's like, cool, okay. So I just find Cass, do I? As he's walking around, he's gonna start talking to himself, and he's gonna start being like, Cass, I don't know if prayer's working here, buddy, so I'm just gonna have to hope you have your ears on. He keeps speaking to Cass. Cass, I don't know what to say, man. I need you back. So if you're out there, it would be great if you could give me a sign, literally anything, so that I don't become empty fodder, just like the rest of everything in here. It'd be quite sweet if I could get back. I'm halfway through Desperate Housewives season 3. As he's talking, there is this snatch of something, like a weird sound. And it sounds like sort of like a voice whispering. And it's indistinct, but it sort of sounds like Cass. Dean hears this as we do, looks around himself. Cass, he says. He starts to follow in the direction of the sound. And as he's walking, there are other sounds. The scene kind of changes a little bit, and it's like there are memories swirling around him, just people, random objects. Maybe this is like a different part of the empty. Maybe this is where people relive their memories. As he's walking around and these ghostly figures of random people are around him, talking to people who aren't there, sitting, crying, weeping, there is another sound as well that accompanies it. A low growl. Dean hears this, turns around to look out for something, pulling out his knife, but there's nothing there. There's the sound of claw marks skittering against a floor that doesn't quite exist, but it sounds quiet enough and far away enough that Dean continues on his way. He calls out Cass's name again, and there is another sound that kind of sounds like something we're familiar with. Is that Dean's voice? Dean looks confused, but he follows the sound again, and eventually he gets to see from behind, a long way away, a man in a tan trench coat. Dean sees this and immediately starts running. He shouts out, Cass! He runs towards him, but Cass doesn't make any move that he's heard him. Dean skitters round to the front of Cass, holds him by the arm, says, Cass, Cass! And Cass is kind of blank in the face. He's not really there, Dean is like, Cass, buddy, it's me. We're gonna get you out of here. Cass doesn't really look at him. He looks behind Dean instead. And Dean turns around and sees that it's this weird ghost version of himself. He kind of backs away in shock. There seems to be a memory that Cass is having. It's Dean telling him that he needs to leave the bunker. In season whatever it was that happened, Dean sees himself sitting on like a ghostly chair saying this towards Cass's direction. He turns around, don't listen to me. Don't listen to that dick. Cass, I'm here now. I'm here to get you. Please wake up. Come on, man. Please, what do I have to say to you to get you to wake up? There is now another growl. Sounds of a creature or something in the distance, and it's closer and louder. Dean looks around for a moment, turns back to Cass. He's panicking and struggling, but he's just trying to get Cass to look at him. He takes Cass's face, turns it towards him, so he has no choice but to look in Dean's eyes. Cass, it's here. I'm real. It's me. Please believe me. You've got to come home, man. You see Cass blink a bit, come to. He stares at Dean in confusion. You're not real, he says. Dean, oh, thank God. Cass, believe me, man, I'm very real. We gotta go. I'm not meant to be here. I'll explain on the way. Cass, we've gotta leave. Cass is still just about coming to. Dean's hands are still on his face. This isn't, you can't be, how are you here? Dean's like, me and Sam and Eileen, we worked together, we found a way, but you gotta come with me now. There's the sound of a growl again, even closer. Dean and Cass turn to look, and they can't really pick it up in the darkness, but there is definitely something out there moving. Maybe a creature, a monster, something that guards this place from anyone waking up a bit too much. The two of them see this, look to each other as if like, did you just see that too? Yeah, okay, we gotta go. They move together, they start running off in the vague direction, wherever it was, trying to find the gateway back to their world. Dean's running and he's holding Cass's hand as he runs. Cass is like, Dean, how did you get here? And he's like, I found it. We just did the research and we found it. Of course we got you back. Cass is like, is Jack okay? Is Claire okay? Is everyone fine? Dean's like, it's fine, we saved the world, just come on, let's just run, we've gotta go. Something starts to follow them and they start to sprint and run. It's proper, like, hero running. Cass's fucking coat is like flapping behind him. They eventually see the glimmer of light in the distance. They head towards this. It must be the candles from the entranceway that they came. They run back to this crack. And just before Dean gets there, he goes, okay, so we figured out a way of getting you back. Cass is like, Dean, can we not have this discussion another time? Dean's like, yeah, no, we have to have it now. So Sam and I found a way of getting you back, but we have to take your grace. Cass is like, what? He's like, we have to take your grace. You can't go through when you're an angel. You have to be human. I'm sorry. I wish there was another way. And he takes out this knife, like one of the kind of old sacrificial knives that we've seen in the show before. He takes out this knife. It's wickedly sharp, and across the top of it there is runes and Enochian written, kind of scribed across in the top. It's the knife that is going to be able to remove Cass's grace. He's like, I didn't want to do it another way, but we were in a rush, and you're not going to be an angel anymore. If you agree, you can stay. But Cass is like, Dean, don't be silly, of course I'm gonna come with you. There is, again, a growl, but much closer this time. The two of them stop talking to turn over and see this giant black wolf, like a hellhound, but the empties version, looking at them, snarling. Drool drips out of his mouth and drops onto the floor, and he's got red, glowing eyes. It's not doing anything for the moment. It seems to just be staring as Dean and Cass stare back, frozen. Cass, not moving an inch, mutters under his breath, Dean, do it now. Dean's like, what? Cass, very slowly, starts to move in front of Dean, between him and the wolf. And he whispers, Dean, stab me in the front. Dean's like, what? When you use it, stab me in the front. It's like, what? Cass, I don't know. Cass, finally makes his way in front of Dean, goes, "Dean!" As this wolf starts to descend on them, Dean panics and, in shock, grabs around from the back of Cass, stabs it in the front, and this burst of angelic grace and light comes spilling out of Cass, hits the beast straight in the face, and it yelps from the light, scrabbling away, looking backwards. As the beast goes though, and the light of this angelic grace starts to dissipate, Cass falls backwards straight into Dean's arms. Dean pulls the knife out, presses his hand over the very real, now very human wound. He picks Cass up in his arms as much as he can, and he carries him back through the portal into our world. They make it back into the cave, and all of them leave. They go. Cass is stabbed. He's been stabbed. He's stabbed. He's injured. And now he is newly human. So we get back to the bunker. And Cass is wrapped up, now bandaged in his room in the bunker. It hasn't been touched clearly since Cass died all those months ago. There's like a layer of dust over everything. Cass is now bandaged but asleep. He looks pale and not well at all. And there is Sam and Dean and Eileen in the room as well, watching him. Dean is sat down by the side of Cass's bed, and Sam is going, "You know, Dean, it'll be okay. He'll be okay. Don't worry about it. We're gonna go to bed. Are you gonna stay?" And Dean's like, "Yeah, I'll just sleep here." So Sam and Eileen leave. They, are going to bed. It's been a long, long day, and Cass is somewhat stable now. Sam and Eileen leave, and Dean is left alone in the room with Cass, who is sleeping. He takes Cass's sleeping hand with both of his, and he looks at him and goes, "No more dying on me, okay? Not again. Can't do it another time, Cass. My heart can't do it." Eventually, he lays his head down on the bed beside Cass and goes to sleep. He wakes up in the morning. Dean is still sat on a chair next to the bed, with his front half of his body lying on the bed asleep next to Cass, and the sound of wings flapping wakes him up. He sits up, and there is Jack there, who sees Cass still unconscious and goes, "Cass!" He gives him a massive hug, and Dean's like, "Jack, be careful. Be gentle with him." You know when kids don't realise that when adults are injured or when people are injured, you've got to be gentle with them. Dean's like, "Whoa, Jack, be gentle with him. He's fine. He's more stable now." Jack presses his hand against Cass's wound. Dean breathes out in relief as the light shines out from his wound, and Cass is now healed. He already looks better, but he's still sleeping. Is he gonna wake up? Dean says. Jack says, "I can fix everything that I can. The wound I can heal, but he's lost his grace, Dean. It's gonna take a bit of a while for him to get better." Jack isn't really looking at Dean though as he says this. Dean nods, relieved. Then he stands up and comes round to Jack on the other side of Cass's bed. He pulls him into a hug, and Jack kind of lets him. He's like, "I'm really sorry I was harsh on you, and I shouldn't have shouted, because I want Dean to learn and grow and start being a better person." Jack, he's like, "I know you were sad about Cass, it's okay." Dean's like, "It's not okay, I shouldn't shout at you, I'm sorry. I'm glad you're here though, kid." And then he kind of pulls him back and goes, "Don't ignore my text again though." Jack is like, "I won't, I promise." Cass is gonna be ill for a little bit of a long time. He's sleeping off a lot of it. He eventually starts to wake up, and Dean is kind of there and kind of gruffly kind of looking after him, keeps making him soup and comfort food and bringing it to him, and Cass is eating little bits of it, but he's still getting used to the fact that he has got to eat. It's going to take the next few weeks for Cass to start healing and waking up a little bit more. And it's weird because every time Cass does wake up, Dean kind of makes his excuses and kind of leaves him to it and goes away and makes him some food and then comes back, drops the food off and leaves again. But every time that Cass is asleep or seems iller, Dean will just stay in the room with him, just waiting. One of these nights where Cass is still like asleep, trying to heal himself, and Dean is sitting there waiting, and Sam's like, "Dean, what? He's fine. Like you don't need to wait." And Dean just says, "Listen, man, I just think he's gonna disappear again. Cass gradually starts moving around and Sam starts helping him to learn how to be a human. Dean keeps seeing this and just kind of leaves them to it. It's like he's avoiding Cass for some reason. Oh, I love how functioning Dean Winchester is as a character. Dean is just avoiding him because he just knows now that he's awake and there's nothing else left to do. They're just gonna have that conversation about what Cass said. And you know what? He's now at a point where he's in his own head has acknowledged the fact that he may feel some things. And you know, women are hot, you know, and sometimes dudes are hot too. Okay, whatever, man, just don't make it weird. Yeah, and he just doesn't want to have that conversation. So Cass is gradually getting there and, you know, is learning to do all this stuff. And Dean's just like, cool, great, just not gonna disturb you guys, I'll go. Cass is like, I think I've upset him. And Sam's like, who still does not know what's happened, is like, no, of course you've not. Like, he's just, Dean did not leave your side the entire time that you were asleep. Believe me, he is happy that you're back. He's just a dumbass who can't express his emotions very well, so, you know. This weird situation where Dean is kind of ignoring Cass even though they live in the same bunker together kind of comes to a head. It's in the middle of the night and Dean is sat at the main table in the kitchen drinking a cup of coffee. He's got like a paperback book with him. He's blearily trying to read it. As he's concentrating on the book, we see behind him that Cass has also come into the kitchen, and the sound of him opening the fridge door, the kind of thunk of it, jolts Dean out of his book. He kind of turns around in surprise. Jesus, Cass, you scared me, he says. Cass looks over to Dean. My apologies, I didn't want to disturb you. Dean's like, nah, it's fine, whatever, man. Puts the book down, drains the last of his coffee. He watches as Cass roots around in the fridge, obviously looking for something. Whatever it is, he's apparently dissatisfied because he just can't seem to find anything. Dean's like, are you hungry? He stands up, goes over to where Cass is, kind of pushes him out the way of the fridge door. Sit down, I'll make you some omelets, he says. He starts taking the ingredients out of the fridge, placing them on the counter. Cass sits down on the bar stool that Dean's just been in and just watches Dean, stares at the back of his neck as he faces towards the counter and cracks the eggs. Can you not sleep? Says Cass, watching him still. Dean shakes his head. Don't sleep much these days, he says. Why are you up? Nightmares are more real than I imagined, Cass says. Yeah, I bet, says Dean, still making the omelettes. Still not looking at Cass. There is a moment of silence, with Cass still watching the back of Dean's neck as he makes the food. Cass hesitates for a moment and finally says, Dean, you don't need to do this. Dean still doesn't look. You don't want an omelette? Cass says, no, treat me differently. Not out of any misplaced guilt you may feel. Dean slows down as he's making the food. He still doesn't turn around though. Cass continues. If I had known that I was going to return after the empty had taken me, I wouldn't have said what I said. Dean's shoulders tighten. It's what, so it was a lie? No, Cass says, it was not. But I know you don't feel the same, and I don't want what I said to change our relationship or make things uncomfortable for you. Dean sighs. He finally puts the food down, turns the hob off, and turns around to face Cass, leaning against the counter. He stares at him for a beat. Can I tell you something? Cass straightens up a bit, apparently surprised with the direction this conversation is going. Anything, he says. Too damn earnest all the time. Dean thinks for a moment before starting. When you died, I was pissed off at you, okay? Because you're a coward. You said your speech, laid it all out, and you died. And that was fine for you, because you said what you had to say. But you didn't even give me the freaking chance, Cass. Cass blinks in shock. Amara's spell, he begins. I'm not talking about Amara's spell, Cass, continues Dean. I'm talking about the 12 years I've known you. I'm not good with words, Cass, you know that. You're the one who asks me how I am and about my feelings and shit. Ever felt the need to share before dying on me? Cass is too stunned to respond, opening and closing his mouth, trying to form words. I spent months praying, pleading that if I got you back, I'd sort my crap out. That I'd tell you how I... He doesn't finish that sentence. He laughs to himself. Turns out I'm as much as a coward as you are, because I did get you back and I can't even look at you. So Dean looks down at his hands, palms up in front of him. He then finally looks directly at Cass for the first time for what feels to both of them in months. I missed you, he says. Cass gently stands up. He crosses over the short distance to Dean between them, and Dean watches him, scared like an animal, as Cass finally closes that gap and envelops him into a hug. He pulls his chest to him, and you can see his face round the back of Dean's shoulders. Dean is frozen for a moment before he wraps his arms around Cass as well, and they hold on to each other. I miss you too, said Cass. I'm sorry. They're still holding on to one another, and Dean whispers over Cass's shoulder, and we see his face, and he says, how could you not know how much I want you, Cass? It's now Cass's turn to freeze, before slowly breaking away from the hug to stare at Dean in his face, reading his reaction. They stare at each other for a moment. Dean, looking at him, takes the front of Cass's lapel and just pulls him in towards him, and they kiss. They stay like that for a very long time, just kissing each other, leaning against the counter in the kitchen in the middle of the night. Okay, now's the part that I just get to let them be happy for a little bit. Now that this has happened, things don't immediately change or anything like that. You know, they're still all hanging out in the bunker, dealing with all the free time they now have. It's nice because you get the impression that people now are coming to stop by. Claire and Kaya, her girlfriend, come visit. Claire is obviously emotional about Cass being back and alive and okay. Jack comes and visits often, but he explains that he's really busy because he's trying to rebuild heaven, and Cass is giving him advice on that. They go to visit Donna and Jodie's and all the girls there. They have a nice time just hanging out with the people that they love. Imagine that, Supernatural, imagine that. Cass decides that he's going to start a project. Cass, because he fucks with nature real hard, as we know, decides that he wants to build a garden. So basically build a garden in the kind of area that I'm imagining behind the bunker, which was once just scrubland. Maybe has a few rusty metal chairs out there or something like that that have been used by the men of letters. And of course that means that he has to take lots and lots of trips to go to the local garden centre or community garden, pick up stuff to build things. And Dean keeps being like, oh yeah man, I'll come with you, And so they go away for long periods of time, and then they start making out in the Impala or in the car, and basically Dean's just using that as an excuse to get out of the house with Cass and for the two of them to spend some time with each other. Just kind of be a bit like flirty teenagers when they first get together and they hang out together without the threat of, the apocalypse happening. Again, Sam and everyone else still doesn't know, and Dean and Cass aren't necessarily acting that differently in front of everyone. The way that Sam finds out is because Sam is going to find out, of course he is, he's not an idiot. I think it would be funny if they did have a conversation, but they didn't. So they're kind of having a film night. Dean and Cass are on one couch in the bunker, Sam and Eileen are on another. Even Jack is there. He's kind of they're all eating popcorn and they're kind of halfway through these massive bowls, so they've obviously been there for a while. They're watching a film on TV, maybe Indiana Jones or something like that, and everyone's kind of concentrating on the movie. Cass is kind of pressed against Dean, not too close, that could be unusual for them, but definitely they're close. Absorbed watching the movie. Also, Eileen is just straight up asleep next to Sam. She's snoring gently. Sam keeps looking at her with adoration in his face and love, because they're gross. Dean is also watching the movie, but his eyes also just keep flicking over to Cass next to him. You kind of see him work himself into something and just goes puts his arm around the back of the sofa to kind of like bring Cass in a little bit more. And he's kind of looking around like, oh yeah, nobody noticed that. I'm the king of subtlety. Cass takes this moment, kind of settles in a little bit more closely to him. You know, it's like you put your arm around someone, you're just kind of like, oh, okay. Dean's like, haha, yes, sick. Looks over and Sam is on the other sofa, who's now spotted this, just like, Dean's still over here and goes, Sam kind of raises his eyebrows like in a question of like, is this what I think it is? Dean doesn't move his arm, but he just kind of like shakes his head like, what? It's no big deal. He looks embarrassed and defensive. Sam immediately picks up on the embarrassment. He can figure out what that embarrassment means. He looks delighted, both with like genuine happiness for them, but also like a shit-eating grin of like, I told you. Dean sees Sam's face, and just before he can say something, let everyone else know that they've been having this silent conversation behind everyone else over the back of the sofas. Dean kind of throws Sam the stink eye and is just like, as subtly as he can without really moving his arm around Cass, just like, don't say anything. Don't make a big deal out of it. He just doesn't want to have that conversation, especially not in front of other people. So Sam just kind of sees him do that and just kind of like shuts up, but also just kind of looks like... Dean sees him do this and he's just like, goes back to watching Indiana Jones fight Nazis on top of a plane or whatever is happening. And it's just this nice little moment. And that's how Sam finds out. Doesn't even need to say anything. So now that Sam knows, and everyone just knows really, Dean is a little bit less worried about being subtle, at least in the bunker. The way that I kind of interpret their relationship, like when they are actually together, is that they don't really do like PDA, like they don't really do public displays of affection, but the way that they do show affection to one another in public is like more subtle things, like when they sit down next to each other, they'll kind of like put their legs like together, like underneath the table. Dean will kind of like sling his like arm over the back of Cass's shoulders, maybe give him a little kiss on the forehead sometimes if he's feeling particularly fluffy about it. Cass's like one like little like physical affection thing that he does is, I just like the idea that he just likes holding Dean's hand, and you know what? Dean just lets him. At first, like it makes him like a bit nervous or uncomfortable, especially when he's in public. I would have like a few scenes where they kind of talk about this, where Dean is now in a relationship with a man. And this is obviously something that's new for him. But I think it would be interesting to have like a few different scenes where Dean and Cass kind of like touch on a little bit the differences between the two of them in terms of how they feel about this, because you know, with Cass just does not care. He doesn't really have a gender. He's lived for 3,000 years. He's not even technically human, which is something that he does keep reminding Dean when he's being particularly in his own head about it. But Dean obviously is raised as a human, as a man who has, as we all know, some issues. Dean's father was Dean's father. I'm so glad that we're having a whole series about him. But because of this, like Dean, I think, is trying to get over all the things that his dad has taught him. Like, you know, he is a man in his 40s now, but you know, he is also like, I keep thinking my old man's gonna come around that corner and beat the shit out of me. I mean, who the fuck thinks that? I think Cass is just lets him just go at Dean's pace and just kind of works with Dean. Cass is like, Dean, I have literally lived 3,000 years. I can wait as long as you need us to. So he basically just lets Dean go at his pace, and Dean, dealing with his sexuality and realizing that he is attracted to men as well as women, it takes a really long time, but he does get there. He keeps forgetting that he's allowed to like touch Cass's hand now or like kiss him or something. He just keeps forgetting, and then he's like, oh yeah, I can do that now. And so as frustrating as it is for Dean to just be like, you don't get it, Cass, you don't get why it's hard for me, Cass will just accept whatever it is Dean gives him at his pace, and I think for Dean that is perfect. I think that it takes a long time for the two of them to kind of get in their own rhythm, but I think eventually they do, and I think the more they get into a rhythm and the longer it goes on, the more Dean starts to feel more and more comfortable. And I think because Dean is a 40-year-old man, I think he's still going to be like you know, like, doesn't really use any labels for himself. He's just a bit like, I'm too old for that. But I also think that Claire thinks this is hilarious. So starts making lots of jokes about Dean being bi and, like, you know, all the memes and stuff like that. And maybe she sends him a few. And Dean is kind of just like, okay, it's a little bit funny. Only a little bit, but it's enough that it kind of, because Claire's making a joke about it and using the word bisexual, it helps Dean to kind of get used to using that terminology for himself, or it becomes less awkward or stilted for him and he kind of understands it a little bit better. In his own mind, I think he gets more comfortable with the idea, like, oh no, this is something that has been a part of me for my whole life. This isn't just like a Cass thing. This is a thing. This is a gay thing. And I think, like, it would be quite nice to have a scene where, like, Sam and Dean are, like, chilling one day, like, they're on a case or something, they're having a beer, and Sam's just kind of like, hey man, can I ask, like, is it just Cass, or is it, how long have you known that, you know, you like men? Like, did you know before Cass? And I think Dean thinks about it for a second, maybe, like, picks the label at the bottle of, like, beer that he's drinking, and he's kind of like, I kind of always knew, but just didn't let myself think about it. Dad was what Dad was, and sometimes it made it hard, didn't it? And then he thinks about it, and he's like, I think Dad did know, though. Sam's like, seriously? And he's like, probably don't remember because you were too young, but when we were on a hunt, you know, we started that at school, and there was this boy that I became friends with, and, well, he was football player. Yeah, that was quite fun. And you know, anyway, I started making friends with this boy, and I liked him, I did. Was it a gay thing? I don't know, man. Whatever it was obviously enough that Dad got real mad. And Sam was like, I don't remember any of this. And he's like, no, I didn't want you to know. I didn't want you to see it. It's in the past now. Sam's like, what are you gonna tell Dad when we get to heaven? Dean's like, you think we're going to heaven? That's optimistic. And Sam's like, yeah, well, it helps that your kid is God, I suppose. And Dean's like, yeah, no, you're not wrong. Dad's just gonna have to deal with it, I guess. Sam kind of looks surprised and laughs. And Dean's like, what? And Sam's like, I've never heard you being, I don't know, not completely positive about Dad. I don't know, man, looks like Cass did you good. Yeah, well, you know, he is an angel. I like the idea that even though they are together now, they still fight. They don't change fundamentally as people, and maybe there's like a scene where they have a big fight and Cass just does what Cass does and he just ups and leaves for a few days, and Dean just loses his shit because he thinks Cass has left fully, but then eventually Cass comes back. Dean is really fucking mad, but he's just like, you can't do that to me, okay? I get that you're pissed off, but you have to talk to me about it when you're pissed off. You can't just leave because it freaks me out and I can't do it. And Cass is like, that's fair enough, okay, I'm sorry. And lo and behold, you learn together in a relationship and become better people. And sometimes they just have arguments for the sake of having arguments. Like, it's fun sometimes to argue with your partner about stupid shit. And the reason why I really ship them is because, like, I do genuinely think that if they were together in the show, like, they would make each other better, happier people. Like, I genuinely think that. And I think they do in my version. I think they kind of just learned to look after each other and love each other and be happy together. Dean kind of teaches Cass about wanting things, and like, if you want something, you kind of go for it, even though he doesn't take his own advice. Cass teaches Dean like how to use his words and not just automatically feel angry as a first response to a situation. Dean, of course, eventually tells Cass that he loves him, and it takes a lot longer for him to get there. When he does, and when he's reached that point, he tells him he loves him all the time. Cass becomes more and more human, he gets settled into life, he starts his own hobbies, he becomes much more his own person, separate from being like a hang-on to the Winchesters, and also doesn't put up with Winchester bullshit as much anymore. So if the two of them are being shits about something, he's just like, no, stop, don't do that, that's stupid. As is his right. Dean is so whipped for Cass, but it works because Cass has literally and emotionally fallen for him, so, you know, it works. They're just nice with each other. How about that, huh? CW? How about that? So, Dean and Cass are together. Their lives have relatively sorted themselves out, but now it's kind of like, well, what are we gonna do? There's no apocalypse. Are we gonna keep hunting? Like, what do we want to do? Sam's always had like a higher purpose kind of thing going on, so I feel like him and Eileen are gonna turn the bunker and convert it into like a safe house for like lots and lots of hunters. I think they'll eventually move out into their own place, into their own house nearby, but basically use it as a kind of like hunter hub. They finally figure out like a universal network for hunters, like a place where people can go to get in contact with other people, because the fact that they haven't got that yet seems really stupid to me. But that's what they're going to use that for. Jack and Claire, I just want to see some scenes of them, or maybe some episodes with the two of them hanging out as like quasi-siblings. Claire and Jack are like the antithesis of one another. Claire is like this harder, grumpy like woman, and then Jack is like a literal 4-year-old boy. But also the two of them like hang out with each other and like go on adventures and like go on hunts together, and like I like the idea of them doing that. Dean and Cass are like kind of like, well, what do we want to do? Are we gonna stay here? Like, what's gonna happen? They figure it out one day when Jack comes to them, and Jack's like, well, I finished rebuilding heaven, but I kind of want to go to school. Like, a lot of people talk about going to school and it sounds fun. I like learning stuff. And Dean and Cass are kind of like, well, you know, kid, like, you can't really go to school because you look like an adult. It's for children. You know, you're too old. And Jack's like, oh, okay. And he just turns himself into like an 11-year-old, because he can do that, because he's God. And I think Dean and Cass would let him, because they're like, you know what, kids had a pretty tough life, give him a chance to kind of be the kid he actually is. I think at that point Dean and Cass would move out of the bunker with Jack now looking like an 11-year-old kid. Like, it's never gonna work the age of it quite right, because like he's only lived for 4 years, but he did look like a 22-year-old man. He kind of has like the mental capacity of both, and also like an 11-year-old. So he's gonna start a new school basically when everyone else does. And I think the three of them are gonna move into a house which is still close enough to Sam and Eileen that they can go visit each other, but it's just their house. And they do still hunting and stuff like that in their spare time, and they still go back to the bunker and then meet up with hunters there. But for the most part, you know what? They just have a pretty normal life. I like the idea of Jack starting a new school and his like two slightly terrifying dads come along like, yes, this is our son. A bit odd, but you know, if anything happens to him, we will blame you. The teachers are like, okay. Dean and Cass call each other their partner in front of other people, partly because Dean complains that calling Cass his like boyfriend makes him sound like a high schooler. And you know, they've known each other for 12 years and they've basically been together raising a kid for a while now. So it's like, yeah, this is my partner Cass, whenever he introduces himself to the two of them to people. My babies. Dean's kind of like, well, I need a job, so he saves up his money and he starts a bar, which kind of turns into like the unofficial hunter bar near the bunker. So yeah, everyone kind of goes there for drinks and for meeting up and stuff. And I like the idea that on Wednesdays, Cass turns it into like an LGBT sober coffee meet for like LGBT teens, because I think Cass would probably go into some sort of like youth work or something like that. I just don't think that he could live his life not trying to help people. And I think he's so great with kids, as we've seen in the show, that I think he'd like really enjoy that, especially over the years, I think, chatting to Claire about like experiences like coming out and stuff like that. I think he'd want to do something like that. And you know what? All of them just live long, happy, healthy lives. They're happy. No big ending. They just get to live their lives, existing in the way that I hope they would want to exist. Yeah. Well, I've been filming this for 2.5 hours, so I hope it was worth it. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, then please give it a thumbs up. And if you want to donate any money, I have a Ko-fi down there. If you want to, you know, reward me with coffee, I'm going to put down in the link below some scripts of the stuff that I wrote kind of prepping for this video. So I hope you enjoyed those little nuggets of extra content. Thank you very much for watching. God, if you see me getting invested in another TV show that ends badly, don't let me do it. Just shout at me through the interwebs, please. I'll see you soon. Bye.